I'd like to call to order this regular board meeting of the Council Bluffs Community School District Board of Directors. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Minshaw,
Present.
Dr. Agress,
Present.
Mr. McGlade,
Present.
Mr. LaFurla,
Present.
Mr. Grove,
Present.
Mr. Arthur,
Present.
and Mr. Kazire.
Present. As you are able, if you would please rise with me to observe a moment of silence. We'll follow that with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before us now, we have the approval of our agenda. Is there a motion?
I would move the agenda be approved as presented.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. And the motion to approve the agenda is passed. Now we have approval of our previous meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I can move approval of the minutes from the work session and regular business meeting of November 27th.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? One thing I would like to bring forward, last meeting, I forgot to bring forward the Knights of Columbus and their generous gift to the school district. That was a oversight on my part, but I wanted to make sure that we recognize that organization for their continuing support of the district. So that would be the only thing that I would add, is my oversight in recognizing that important organization. So with that, we have a motion to approve our minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. And our minutes have been approved. Now we have the time for public participation. This is an opportunity for those in the public who wish to address the board on any item before us on our agenda or anything that they may wish to discuss. And now is the time and place for you to step forward to make those comments. Seeing no one moving toward the podium, we will move next to Dr. Murillo's report.
Thank you, Mr. Kozar. At this time, I'd like to ask Ms. Ostrowski to please join me at the podium. We are going to recognize our Abraham Lincoln High School cheer team tonight. And Ms. Ostrowski, I will let you take the floor, and I will join you in just a few seconds.
Wonderful. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We love that we're proud of our schools portion of the superintendent's report each meeting. It's wonderful to have our students and their parents in the audience and to share our pride in them with you and those watching at home. So we're pleased to introduce and celebrate the 2018-19 co-ed cheer team from Abraham Lincoln High School. We're cheering for the cheer team. They earned first place in the Class 4A co-ed cheer division of the Iowa High School Cheerleading Championships the first week in November. We are proud that the team and their coaches have represented our school district and their school so well. And they are getting ready and planning and raising money, I might add, to go to nationals in Dallas. When is that? January 25th. Okay. So as I call your names, student athletes, would their parents please stand, each of you, and be recognized for obviously the time and the resource and the support that you give your children. And also would like to thank coaches Nicole and Savannah, right? For all of your work and dedication to our students. It's just amazing. All right, Brett Bent. Zoe Breitkreutz. Mason Carruthers. Desiree Dewberry. Bryson Faulkner. Jace Fisher. Isa Fonseca. Owen Hansen. Raquel Hawley. Lillian Herzog. Sydney Holton. Adriana Herta. Alec Lander. Kylie Leonard. Caleb Molzik. Zach Oberhelman. Anthony Oberlin. Maddie Reed. Kaylee Ring. Emmy Stasko. Cameron Taylor. Haley Whitfeld. Hunter Will. Austin Woolley. Okay, all right, good. Well, congratulations, team, and I think Mr. Stinman is going to line you up for a good photo, but I think you guys have all done this before. You know how to, they know how to form a nice little, oh yeah, hey, a pyramid, no. Mr. Kozier, would you join us for the photo? And parents, please come on up. Don't be shy.
You were a TJ, right?
Who's excited to be going to nationals? Yeah, we'll look forward to hearing how it goes. Yeah, is that okay? Okay.
That's amazing to be somebody from this town.
Jill graduated from Lewis.
Did you notice he was bringing in the spirit there? How about that?
Well,
Right?
that's the strength of our board, I think.
Because it's about them.
That's what I say.
It's like some of the comments you said in there. Expectations,
That's Miss.
seeing over the time.
At this time, we would like to continue in our celebration of excellence in and around our community, in our school district. And tonight, I'd like to invite Deb Goodman, who is a longtime educator and who assists with creating partnerships with businesses in our community, and we all know how important that is. So Deb Goodman, would you come up and introduce our special guests and present a couple of awards?
Hey, I was going to say, it does my old heart good to see a former student as the coach for the team. and many former students on the board here, so thank you for your service. Tonight, we would like to publicly thank two individuals and companies they represent for their support of the Council Bluffs Community School District's summer internship program. Students had the opportunity last year to apply, interview, and work during the summer at TS Bank and Third Degree Screening. Kevin Forrestal represents TS Bank's Data Science Department. This is the second year TS has been involved in the summer internship program. Over the last 2 years, 3 students have had the opportunity to work side by side with data scientists to analyze and solve problems with respect to banking issues. Students practice soft skills as well as diving deep into data science technical skills during their internships. This is the second year that TS has been honored as a platinum member for having interns in their business. Kevin, would you come forward? Jeannie Waters, representing Third Degree Screening, stepped up last year to offer 2 of our students the opportunity to work as data entry specialists. For these 2 students, this was the first jobs they'd ever had. So their learning spanned creating resumes, interviewing, filling out all the onboarding forms that they had, learning why Mr. FICA takes their money, and how to apply the computer skills that they possessed. Both students were given multiple projects to complete over the course of the summer, and it enhanced their ability to dig deep into data research. This is the first year that Third Degree Screening will be receiving a platinum award. Jeannie, could you come forward? We would like to recognize TS Bank and Third Degree Screening for their commitment to helping students apply their skills outside the classroom through internship experiences. Because of them, they allow our students to achieve more. Do you want them to talk at all, or?
Now I get my AL t-shirt.
You got an orange hat in your back pocket, though. What is it? I know, I heard it. I didn't know the answer. Do you know what it is?
Okay, thank you for allowing us to recognize the associations that support our school district and support those students that we recognized earlier. Moving on, last month, a few of the board members were able to attend the Iowa Association of School Boards Convention, and we have a little time to reflect and to talk about what went on and at the convention, and it was I think it was an incredible convention this year. They had some return keynote speakers that were very inspirational, have a good message to send us out to back to our schools. And Bill, if you could reflect and give us some, just three things that stood out in your mind regarding the district or the convention, pardon me.
Well, as always, they always talk about student achievement, and the one speaker, Honeycutt, really zeroed in and challenged us to say, to ascertain whether we're really meeting the needs of every student. There's no excuse for not meeting the needs of every student if we are creative in how we do that, and I just appreciate that, because in a big organization, it's easy to overlook people, and I think to be reminded that every student counts is huge. The other one that was on there was the speaker that talked about technology and how that's changing. First thing he did is bash those of us who have an old flip phone, so that's what I had in my pocket. But he said they're gonna be gone, so you better get used to these smartphones and figure out how to work them. And he had some other challenges along the technology line for how teachers use them in the classroom, so I thought that was good. The third one was don't overlook the IASB resources. I mean, it's just, they're as close as a keyboard, and they've got a lot of things on there that can help us. Sometimes I think we overlook that. Of course, I'm prejudiced because I was on that board for 7 years, but now I'm off, so my term there is done. But it was a good experience to see how the state level works, and I think every board board member needs to take time from time to time, just get on their website and say, okay, what's there? What can help us? Maybe it's something we're dealing with here locally, and there's nothing wrong with obviously talking amongst ourselves and our staff, but it doesn't hurt to go outside ourselves once in a while too.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one thing that I hope that when we start looking at our work session so that we'll be having this coming year, those items that we'll be discussing, hopefully we'll be using those resources at IASB so that we can continue those conversations. And one of the nice things that, I mean, every year they talk, they give out the awards for better boardsmanship. That's whole boards receive continuing education. And when we look at our board development, I think we've been doing that, but we just haven't been filing the paperwork for us to receive those boardsmanship award points, so that we can each be recognized for what we do in continuing our education as a board member. So
We did achieve that 1 year.
right, we did.
4 or 5 years ago.
We did, but we just kind of forgot about that. So hopefully, Chris and I will be developing the work session topics, so that it'll force us more to use those resources that are available to us. John, you also attended. You were our delegate. Is there anything that came that spoke to you regarding the convention?
One takeaway I had is one of the districts was there, and they talked about at the meetings, every board meeting, at the end of the meeting, they bring up, each board member brings up a couple of key points that they took away from the evening's meeting. So I don't know if that was something I thought would be pretty helpful, and then it kind of drives home what the big topics were in that night's meeting. Also, one of the speakers spoke about the generations in the schools right now, and I was shocked when he said that we have currently 5 different generations in the educational system, and just the way he talked about mingling and learning from every different generation, you know, that we all have something to offer, and they all have something to offer, and I thought that was a pretty
And that's a good point to make, because I hadn't ever thought about it. But when we look at our makeup as a board, we are 5 generations that are on this board. So, so each of us may have our own way of communicating. And that was one of the major points that the keynote speaker brought out, is that we need to find the way to communicate that is best received. So, I mean, we have to make the effort to make communication easier. So if it's a matter of texting or instant messaging or just plain old pen and paper in the mail, we have to find those ways to communicate so that we can engage everybody at the table. So that was a very important topic that was brought up. And after thinking about it, it's like, wow, we're there. We have the 5 generations at the board. So, and one thing that I brought back from the meeting, from the convention, was the importance of being able to measure. I mean, if we don't measure, we only can improve what we measure. So to me, that brought home the importance of setting our goals as a board and measuring those goals, and how well we achieved on reaching toward those goals. Lord Kelvin said it very well. I mean, and he has one of my favorite quotes, and I don't want to misquote him, but Lord Kelvin, he was a 19th century mathematician, physicist, and engineer. And he stated, and I quote, "I often say that when you can measure what you are speaking about, you express it in numbers. You know something about it. But when you cannot measure it, when you cannot express it in numbers, your knowledge is of a meager and unsatisfactory kind." So basically he's saying, if you're not measuring it, you're not making improvements. So that was the one thing that I brought back from the convention, is that we expect our teachers to measure their improvement, and I think we need to be, as a board, held to the same standard. We need to go that route. So we may be looking at, I think it would be important for us to look at self-evaluation, so that we can make sure that we as a board are doing what we said we're going to be doing. So,
You know, President Dave, one way to do that is piggybacking on what John said about that school board. At the end of their meeting, each board member goes around and says, these are 2 things we should all talk about, the public, after our meeting, so that we're talking the same message. And, you know, I've occasionally had people, well, what do you do as a school board member? You know, I kind of stammer around and say some stuff, but it would be nice to say, well, for instance, at the last meeting, we had 2 things that everybody agreed on was very important, and then be able to say them. I think that has some merit. It
Yeah.
would extend our meeting a little bit, but maybe it'd be worth it, public relation-wise.
well, we talked about that at our last board officers meeting, and one thing that will be coming out shortly or soon will be a little business card size trifold piece of paper that we can stick in our wallet that has our goals and how our numbers are, so that we can, because I have trouble from time to time remembering, gosh, we do a lot of things, but these are the key things that we can do. And more than likely, Chris had talked about making that electronic in nature, so that we can put it on our phones, and if somebody stops us in the street, well, right. But see, that's why we're having the paper. We're having the paper. Yeah. Yep, we have the paper
You can just
document.
call Dave and
Yeah.
ask him to read it to you.
Yeah. But this way, when we are in conversations with members in the community, we can give them the correct information, so that they can feel confident in what we are doing is making an impact on student achievement. So sometime soon, we'll be getting that out in paper form and then electronically, so that we can have those important documents in front of us. Because I hesitate to say things because I don't want to misspeak, and I want to make sure that I have that information right, just like all of you are concerned to make sure we're stating the right information. So those are some things that are coming forward as we progress. So thank you for that time, and we'll with your little survey, when you turn those in to me tonight, we'll start planning those work session items. So we'll move forward now to our presentations. Dr. Murillo,
Yes, thank
the
you.
floor is yours.
Thank you so much. At this time, Dr. Borthman is going to come and share our fall 2018 MAP results. We are pretty excited to have a district assessment that we can use to help us grow and become a better district, not only in instructional wise, but also in our conversations and really being more student-centered. So Dr. Borthman, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. I hope that I can share some knowledge that's significant and substantive. I hope it's not meager, because I'm going to share some numbers.
There you go. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing I wanted to do tonight is just do a little bit of review on a couple of the definitions that we set forth when we brought you this report in the spring. And those are around the 2 district data points that we're going to track and collect over the next several years with regard to MAP. And so tonight we're specifically going to be focused in on what we're calling MAP performance. And this is the percentage of students who are scoring at the average, high average, and high levels on the MAP reading and mathematics test. In the winter and spring, we'll be bringing you data regarding MAP growth. And that's the percentage of students who are demonstrating growth, either meeting their own goals or growing as much as kids who look like them when comparing the fall and winter and spring tests. So we won't be bringing you that tonight because we have to have 2 data points in order to compare growth scores. So I also wanted to put this in some context tonight, and that is, if you remember, one of our superintendent goals for the year is to improve academic achievement. And specifically tonight, we're going to be focused in on the 3rd target of those goals, the one regarding getting 80% of our students to score at the average, high average, and high levels on MAP. So we're going to dig into that a little bit tonight. The other 2 measures, the first 2 that you see there, regarding demonstrating growth and achieving individual growth targets, we'll be bringing you an update on those when we do our winter assessment in February. So I want to start tonight with mathematics. What you're seeing in front of you is the percentage of students who scored at the top 3 levels on mathematics this fall by grade level. And so you see that the upper band, our target is 80%, and we have several grade levels that are at or above 60% and are making progress. And we have a couple of grade levels where we have some concerns, and we are putting some plans in place, specifically with 7th grade math. We've identified a couple of areas that we can do a better job in. We've put in a new math series this year to address some of the discrepancies that we have been seeing in our math curriculum, especially at middle school and high school. And we also adopted the algebra, geometry, algebra sequence last year. This will be our first full year of implementation. So we have some things in place that we're using to try to attack some of the discrepancies that we saw in mathematics. The second slide tonight shows you the change by cohorts of students from their spring test to their fall test. And so the line is would be no change in scores. Anything above the line is a positive change, anything below the line is a negative change. So you can see in mathematics, 8 out of our 11 grade levels had a positive change when compared to their spring scores, and some of them were quite significant. So the third slide tonight gives you an update on our performance in reading. And again, this is the percentage of students by grade level who on the MAP test scored at the top 3 levels. And you can see that where we've put a lot of our time and resource over the past several years in really shoring up our reading curriculum, using our FAST data to identify students who need additional supports, going after at the elementary, especially the primary grades with more phonics instruction and the use of the Wonders instructional materials, we're really starting to see some traction. I would ask you to look specifically at our primary grade levels, kindergarten, first, and second grade. Our second grade cohort is the first class who's had 3 consecutive years of instruction with the WonderWorks instructional materials. And they happen to be our top 3 performing classes right now. So we're really encouraged that our hypothesis may be true, that when we can provide greater foundational reading intervention skills at those early grades, that we can see some early achievement gains at primary levels. That also holds true when you look at the growth or the changeover from spring to fall. 9 out of our 11 grade levels had a positive change from spring to fall. So that's very encouraging. Our second grade class had a tremendous change from spring to fall, over 20% change in scores from spring to fall. So where are we going from here? First of all, students and teachers are actively working together right now to set individual growth goals so that they can monitor their own progress, set a target, and see how they did on the winter test. We're intensifying some supports for classrooms in need and really looking at classrooms where fewer than 50% of the students were meeting those 3 levels on the MAP test. Principals and principal supervisors are working with individual teachers to identify where they need additional help so we can get those kids the services that they need and shore up that core instruction as our primary focus. And then third, we'll continue to monitor and review this data and bring you regular updates regarding progress that we've made. And like I said earlier, in the winter, we'll be bringing you 2 of those data points back, both the performance and the growth data. And then in the spring, we'll be giving you kind of a longitudinal look from spring last year to spring this year, as well as the updates from fall to spring, winter to spring. So at this time, I would welcome any questions that you might have about the fall 2018 MAP data.
Looks like you're ready, Bill.
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming, and this is not to be a put down to the other grade levels, but that second grade just jumps out at you for achievement. So I assume you administrators or the teachers themselves are saying, what's going on here?
But like I said, our hypothesis is, especially looking at second grade reading, that we believe that that may be a result of that first class having 3 consecutive years of spiraled curriculum, all the same type of materials at a greater level of rigor, we believe, than previous years, and a real emphasis on foundational reading skills.
This year's first grade, look that way next year.
We would hope so, correct. That's correct.
So second grade math also jumped by 80–90% of that same number. Have we been doing something different with them in math? I mean,
We have. So last year, we scrapped our sequence for second grade math because we had identified some holes that needed to be closed specifically in second grade. So our curriculum specialists and our instructional coaches worked and rewrote the entire second grade curriculum so that it focused more on spiraling skills from first grade into third grade. And we also this year put in a new elementary math series that spirals all the way from kindergarten up through 5th grade. And so I believe it's too early for us to say whether or not the curriculum materials are having an influence on the data, but I do believe that the efforts that we undertook last year preemptively could have a positive impact on that data.
do we feel that we have things in place to keep that class? Like, it's just an amazing jump, keep them progressing because after second grade, a lot of the scores drop off or they're highly variable each year.
Yeah. So one of the things we do have a little bit of concern about is the self-regulation that it takes for students moving from the second grade assessment to the third grade assessment. And in second grade, they are basically paced through the assessment with headphones, and it's proctored to them. When they get to third grade, it's self-proctored, so the computer prompts them through it, but there's no more headphones, no more verbal directions. They've got to do all of the reading themselves. So we believe that there could be a correlation between that, but we don't have enough data at this point to tell. Regarding your question about being able to sustain that result, to me, that's one of the #1 reasons why we need a guaranteed and viable curriculum that is consistent across all grade levels, so that we don't see these wild dips and swings in student achievement scores, which is why we have gone toward a more structured spiraled curriculum in math and reading at elementary.
Were we surprised by the growth in second grade or the issues with seventh grade?
I thought we would have good growth in most of our grade levels. I didn't anticipate that it would be quite that high. I mean, that's pretty remarkable to see that much change from the spring test to the fall test. We did have 12 weeks of instruction in the fall, which is a little atypical in MAP testing. Most districts test a little bit earlier in the fall, and we plan on testing a little bit earlier in the fall next year as well. The 6th and 7th grade math are concerning, and it's one of the reasons why we looked at some new materials this year that are a little bit more sequential in nature and have a little bit higher rigor level and engagement level for students.
This second grade here, is this current third graders that we're talking about?
The current second
Those are the
graders,
current
kids
second
who were
grade.
first graders last year. Current cohort class.
So would you say that the seventh grade math, if I asked you what stands out in this data in terms of this requires our immediate attention, is there anything other than seventh grade math that stood out to you?
I would say that gives me the most heartburn right now is middle school math. I am very much encouraged by where we're headed with reading. I do have some concerns about 7th grade reading as well. And so Mrs. Smith has worked closely with both the principals at Kern and Woodrow Wilson to put some very precise plans in place for how we're going to support those classrooms a little bit differently. And as you saw in the building level data that I put in your board packet, there are some buildings where we can intensify some supports as well at specific grade levels. And so Mr. Schultz has been working with elementary principals to do the same. So in the spring, throughout the rest of the winter and the spring, we will be focusing primarily on classrooms that need additional support. And so that's where we'll be spending our time observing, giving feedback, honing our feedback, and then providing more supports where they're necessary.
Do we anticipate communication with parents and the community with things we're doing specifically at some of these schools that are underachieving? Are we gonna, what's that gonna look like?
I think what it will look like is by individual students.
Okay.
So as individual students need additional support, they will see their MAP goals. By Christmas break, all of the letters will have been distributed out to parents and families with definitions about how to read their MAP reports. We put together kind of a one-page guide that defines the terms that are used in the MAP reporting materials, and then they'll have a printout of their actual students' progress this fall, as well as how it compares to other students who also took the test this fall. So we'll continue to utilize, our teachers are our absolute best resources when it comes to communication with families, because they are intimately involved in the work and the students' work every single day.
And those goals that the students
Yeah.
and the teachers are working on together are individualized goals.
Absolutely.
But those teachers also have the ability to group those students with
do.
like goals and at similar levels of proficiency on things.
You're correct. They can actually go down to the actual standard level and look at concepts where groups of students are struggling and put them together for small group instruction with this resource. So,
We have enough resource material or resources available to do that?
it's a really good question. We are, Mark and Julie and I are meeting on the next Friday to have a day of planning to figure out how we're going to differentiate resources based on needs of schools. And that's a little bit different approach than what we've looked at previously. And Dr. Murillo has really challenged us to think about making sure that we're supporting where the need is and not necessarily just putting it everywhere. And so we're going to grapple with some, some paradigm shifts about resource allocation and how we intensify supports where we have the most need. So I don't have the answer to that. I don't know if we have enough resource because we haven't really looked at differentiating resources that way.
Well, you haven't had the tool to do that, have
Certainly
you?
couldn't pinpoint it as accurately as we can now.
Were we, I say again, were we shocked by middle school math, how this came back?
I
Have we
think-
had that discussion yet with the right teachers to know that, or the right groups to know that?
I think anytime I see student achievement that is at those levels, I am not satisfied.
And I'm willing to bet the teachers aren't either.
And they
And
are
they're
not.
probably disheartened by it. And so whatever it is that we can do to help support them
Yeah, with it,
and their students,
That's
I
why
think
we're
is
going
the
after a
priority at this
support-based
point.
model. It's about
Yep.
how can we identify where we need additional, like I said, additional resources,
Mm-hmm.
additional supports, what professional development needs to take place, what intervention needs to be taking place for students. Because the last thing we want to do is pound people over the head with the data. That is not the point of instructional data. The point of instructional data is to be able to see where we're doing really well so we can continue to replicate that performance, and where we need additional support and resources so we can move and direct our support there. It's not to put fear in anybody's hearts, and it's not to demean anybody for the work that they're doing.
I appreciate that message because I believe in constructive criticism.
Sure.
And I think everyone becomes a better educator for that. But I think we have to have the supports in place, so I appreciate the comments. Thank you for sharing the data.
Is there anything you think the board can do as you start to move into these next steps to support whatever the goals are going to be as you're targeting some of these areas that you want to improve?
I think the conversations that you're having tonight are very positive about, key takeaways that you can talk about the data and about things that we should be proud of. And I think the more well-versed that we are with actually knowing what our data says and how it helps us get better, the better we are as a community. And I think Mr. Kazire is right. When we actually look at, and we measure something and look at the data, that's what gets monitored, is what gets measured. And so we're trying to be very transparent with the data and provide the supports that are necessary in order to help all of our kids get better. We believe that everybody does the very best that they know how to do. And so it's about how do we make sure that everybody has the tools that they need to be able to feel confident in the work that they're doing.
So I guess I know that there's like these 60% of the students that are hitting the growth target in like the high average, and those levels, but the 40% that haven't hit that point yet, do we know, while they might not be hitting that level, are they still hitting their growth goals? So, I mean, they may not get up to that as quickly, but have they been making those strides?
Really good question, Mr. McGlade. We don't know that yet because we don't have the growth data until the next administration of the test. But we will, when we come back in February, we'll bring you that data, both the percentage of students who are making some growth, any growth at all, and the percentage of students who are meeting their individual growth targets. We'll bring that to you by grade level.
maybe I'm.
Well, thank you for the presentation. That's very mindful that we take time to discuss these assessments, so. Next up, we have our resolution portion of tonight's meeting. We have our first resolution is in regard to Chapter 12 exemption application. Do we have a motion?
Be it resolved, the Board of Directors approve the Chapter 12 exemption application requiring year-long physical education in grades 9 through 12 with public content to include in order to be in compliance with the Iowa Chapter 12 requirements. A waiver needs to be approved by the Iowa Department of Education regarding the schedule for physical education classes in grades 9 through 12. The waiver is requesting permission to offer physical education in grades 9 through 12 every day for one semester rather than every other day all year. Scheduled physical education in this way allows students to take an additional course in the off semester. The waiver application is due to the Department of Education on January 1st, 2019. This waiver has been submitted and approved by the Iowa Department of Education for the last 9 years.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
This would be for the 1920 school year.
Yes.
Hearing no further,
Is it for the 1923? I guess so, okay. Yeah.
Right.
It's 6 months to get it done.
I was just asking because I knew that we did this on the trimester schedule and didn't know if moving to semesters was going to change that or not. Sounds like it doesn't. So.
okay, with that, before us, we have a resolution to approve our Chapter 12 exemption. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Ogres?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes. Next up is the appointment of a board member, our board member, to the Potawatomi County Assessors Conference Board. Is there a motion?
You know, I will move that we appoint John Minshaw as the representative of the Council Bluffs Community School to serve a second term on the Pot County Assessors Conference Board.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are you, you must be okay with that? Obviously? Yes, good.
It takes a couple terms just to figure out what they're doing.
Right, it does. It does. And they meet twice a year.
I've done it several years.
Thanks, John.
Yes, thank you very much. Before us now, we have the appointment of Mr. John Minchell as the Council Bluffs Community School District Board of Directors, member to the Potawatomi County Assessors Conference Board. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes. Before us now, we have a resolution regarding our dropout prevention. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I can move, resolve, let me take all that back. Resolution to request from the SBRC $3,018,008 of modified supplemental amount associated with the at-risk and dropout prevention program and at-risk services for the 2019-2020 school year.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, before us now is the resolution approving our dropout prevention, modified allowable growth. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes, and the motion has been approved. Before us now, we have the approval of our negotiating attorneys. Is there a motion?
I move to hire Mark McQueen from Baird Home Law as the district's representatives for CBEA negotiations.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Who's the second?
Troy.
Okay.
Just a question. His experience was with Iowa Western. Has he had experience at the public K-12 situation too?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Ms. Warren to join me. because you were part of the interview that we had.
Go to the podium.
Yes. Could be legal.
I know he's had experience with the union with the police officers and also with the Iowa Western, but I'm not aware of his K-12 experience. But I know that, is it Dr. Kinney at Iowa Western was very happy with his performance.
And he talked with us and shared with us his study and knowledge of Chapter 20. And he's consulted with other districts, but I don't believe he has led for a K-12. And I should have checked that, so I apologize.
An extensive review of our current contract and brought a
Yeah.
lot of good ideas to the table.
Well, fresh eyes are good. I'm not opposed to that, but I'm just wondering, at the convention, there were several sessions about what school districts have done with this change.
Yes.
And maybe this would be another place where we make sure we use that IASB resource
The
to get
one-
an idea of what other districts have done, because we don't want to mess this up.
No, I did talk with several of the UEN superintendents during our session to talk through what they had done with their negotiations and their outcomes. Last year, I think Mr. Wilson and I spent a lot of time with Jim Hanks as he was going through Sioux City. And I watched as, he is a great resource, and he has been very good to advise us. But I also watched as he went back and forth from Des Moines and traveled. And this attorney would be local. We wouldn't have to pay for the transportation costs and those. And since he is very familiar with Chapter 20, had done the studies, and he did pro bono evaluating our contract, come in with ideas, and spent about 2 hours with Emily and Mr. Wilson. I'm not sure if you were in the room with us or not.
A little bit.
And he walked through some areas and talked to us about Chapter 20. And so we felt very comfortable with him. And again, we are not looking to have any choppy waters with this. We want to work with CBEA. We want to negotiate a good contract with them and still live within our means. That's our goal.
Okay, sounds good.
Would you just, oh, wait.
Sorry,
No, I just-
sorry, I didn't.
No.
Emily.
Let's say Miss
Emily.
Warren.
Yes.
She'll be very proud. No, I just, would you say that you would appreciate having him to guide you through your first year doing this?
I would,
Because you,
absolutely.
yeah.
I have not, no, I
Okay.
have not done negotiations before, and we want it to be as amicable as possible, and fair for everyone, so I think it would be good to have a neutral party come in and kind of get us started with the new Chapter 20 changes, our first negotiation with CBEA.
Any other questions? Discussion? Okay,
Good?
thank you. Sorry. Okay, before us now, we have the approval of our attorney for our negotiations with CBEA. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes, and the motion has been approved. Next, we have approval of policy 625. Is there a motion?
Move approval of the first reading of policy 625, high school graduation requirements.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Yeah, I can second it.
A motion and a second. Discussion.
We should probably read the public content. The board approved several months ago the district's employee handbook. Oh, whoops, wrong
Nope.
one.
Well,
One ahead of you.
yes. You're so, yeah.
That one. We should probably read that public content. The Board of Education is asked to consider approval of the first reading of Policy 625 High School Graduation Requirements, which has been updated to reflect the updated requirements in Iowa Code regarding financial literacy and earning high school credit in middle school. This change is being recommended separately from the normal policy review cycle in advance of the student registration process to select courses for the next school year. Can you tell us how this came about?
Dr. Borthman can join me.
Thank you.
He's been working really hard to get our one course in place and not to hinder any of our students from continuing in the AP or concurrent. And so I'll let him dive into that for you.
Yeah, great question. There were two changes in Iowa code last year that kind of hit us by surprise. The first was the addition of a financial literacy graduation requirement. So all students are required now to obtain a half a unit, or for us, that would be 1 credit of financial literacy. We took some time with our curriculum specialists and our teachers to identify how we might want to go about making sure that our students had those competencies. And so what we've done is decided to obviously add it to the graduation policy, so we're in compliance with Iowa code, but also give students multiple pathways to meet that requirement. They can do it by taking their regular economics class, so we will be revising that curriculum to make sure that those competencies are embedded. Can also take an elective class that we currently offer called Money Matters. They can also test out or take an online version of the course. So we didn't want to make that burdensome to students, especially those who are already in our pipeline, because that starts with the class of 2020.
I think you're going to have significant plausibility from parents. They're going to
Yeah.
really be happy to hear this,
Yeah,
me in particular. So examples, balancing a checkbook,
got it.
paying bills on time, fiscal responsibility.
Yeah. So we've always had the course, but it was an elective course. Now the state
Now they
has
have to take it.
helped us out.
That's awesome.
And, required it. The second change is that the state, there was a statute passed that also now requires that school districts award high school-based transcripted credit for any student who takes a high school-based class in middle school. And that was not our previous practice. Our previous practice was to allow students to accelerate through the curriculum and not open the high school transcript until high school. Our hand has been forced. Now the high school transcript will be opened in middle school as long as the student takes the class that's taught by a licensed teacher that's certified to teach that high school class, and it is the same high school curriculum.
Would that be retroactive at all for us? No, okay.
No, you can't do that, Kyle.
Kyle, I'm not reopening your transcript. Just teasing. No, the code change happened in July, so it will be for students enrolled this year. So this year's students, 8th graders, as long as they were in a class that was taught by a licensed teacher and it was the same curriculum, they will receive high school credit. And for right now, for us, that includes students who will be taking middle school Algebra 1 this year, and then next year, students who will be taking Algebra 1, Spanish 1, and Earth and Space Science.
Very cool.
So with our IB programs, we've been able to create a pathway for students to get through the first year of Spanish in middle school, so they articulate into Spanish 2 in high school as a freshman. The other changes on there are cleanup on changes, course name changes. You'll notice that the math changed, and then you'll notice that there was an addition of conceptual chemistry and physics as a result of curriculum changes last year. So those are just cleanups for clarity.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have before us a resolution to approve the first reading of Policy 625. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Dr. Ogres.
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw.
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes, and the motion has been approved. Now we have a resolution regarding our employee, 2018-19 employee handbook. Is there a motion?
You know, I can move to approve the modifications and changes to the 2018-2019 employee handbook as presented. Joe wants to read it.
After a second, I will second. The board approved several months ago the district's employee handbook. Since that time, we determined the need for clarification on some items and the need to update language related to changes in processes. The revisions will be effective January 1st. Ms. Warren met with all of the union groups to review the proposed language changes. There were no objections to the changes. We anticipate the handbook will be revised for next school year based upon negotiations and any other changes in processes.
Thank you. Discussion. Hearing none, we will move to the vote. We have a resolution before us to approve the 2018-19 employee handbook modifications. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Dr. Ogres.
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes, the motion has been approved. Next, we have our consent agenda. The items on our consent agenda are the 2019-20 high school program of study, the Air Force Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps, memorandum of agreement, special education contracts, personnel actions, claims and warrants, and purchasing card activities. Do we have a motion?
I would move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
We have a motion and a second?
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I guess the one question I would have in the program of study for course deletions, just for the CE courses that there's no instructor at the high schools, would that mean that they would be allowed to go out to Iowa Western to complete the courses?
Yes.
Yes.
And then does any of the changes, the TradeWorks name branding, cause any issue with credits? Elsewhere, am I applying, I'm sure you're gonna get the extra piece of paper to make that flow forward.
Credits would come through the,
Okay.
so, the name of the program would not.
Okay, with no further discussion, we have the consent agenda before us. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes. With that, we have completed our business and look forward next meeting where we will run through the gamut. Once we get that on our agenda, to publish it, to, I guess, reflect on items that we feel are important that came out of each of our meetings.
Is that January 8th?
That would be our January 8th meeting.
I will be out of town.
That's fine. We'll continue and we will think about you.
Thank
Um,
you.
Yes. With that, we are adjourned.